This is an exclusive presentation of WOWO 1190 AM and 107.5 FM, Unholstered.
Hey, hope you're having a good weekend. Welcome on into another edition of Unholstered. Hopefully you're having a fantastic day. My name is Kayla Blakesley. I'm one of your hosts here on Unholstered, and as always, I'm alongside my co-host, Sophia.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sophia Rosales-Gatina. I am a captain with the Fort Wayne Police Department, and welcome to the show.
And I am a representative, if you will, of the media side. Obviously, Sophia represents the police side, and that's what this show is all about. Your media teaming up with your police to share and tell and talk about all the stories that don't often get told when it comes to law enforcement. And Sophia, that's where we're starting today, because we're talking about heightened security. It's obviously a wild topic of conversation because of everything that went down in Highland Park there in Illinois. But it also is here around our neck of the woods where we are at, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, because we are just wrapping up our Three Rivers Festival in downtown Fort Wayne. And every year, you know this, the festival kicks off with a huge parade as well. And I know going into the festival, there were some concerns. Just folks were a little bit nervous because of the shooting that just happened at the July 4th parade there in Highland Park. And I know that the Three Rivers Festival Board of Directors decided, you know what, we're going to apply some extra security measures this year that we haven't in years past. But I feel like we never hear your side of things, the perspective of law enforcement, what goes down, what doesn't go down, crack the myths for us or tell us the truth. I mean, how does security, for example, we'll just use the Three Rivers Festival, how does security for something like that actually work? What goes into it?
So there's two divisions of security at the festival. So the Three Rivers Festival hires off-duty officers to provide security for the venues. So the concerts, the art in the park, the food alley, those kinds of areas, the Three Rivers Festival hires their own security for that.
So they're not hiring Fort Wayne Police Department officers?
No.
Oh.
Well, they do hire Fort Wayne Police Department officers, but they're off-duty when they do those events.
Okay. Then
the city provides security as well for parade, for the outlying areas, parking lots, the general vicinity of it. And we'll also go into the venues as well. We're in and out of there too. It's just a matter of a visible presence to kind of keep things tamped down, because it can get a little crazy. I mean, I think this year already, my daughter said it was all over the internet. There was a fight between two girls. I think there were people that were armed that were arrested that weren't supposed to have weapons. They had prior felonies.
I know that was a big topic too going into it. You can't carry down at Headwaters Park, and I know a lot of folks weren't happy about that.
Right.
Constitutional carry just went into law here in Indiana on July 1. So people were all kinds of confused of whether or not they could carry their firearm or not carry the firearm, which we'll talk more about that next week. But I think it's important for people to understand that you guys are there in a very large capacity.
We are, and we actually took up more of a role this year because of what happened in Highland Park.
How so? What was different?
So this year, normally we're always involved in the parade. We always have honor guard. The chief usually walks, and we usually have a SWAT vehicle or cop vehicles blocking traffic.
Cool
so we're
stuff.
always out there.
Yeah.
But this year, we added extra protection around the area. There was several more dump trucks that were brought in to keep people from crashing through the parade in a vehicle, and there were extra security measures.
That's what those are for.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah, that's a really big deterrent. I mean, obviously, it keeps a vehicle from coming down a large area through there.
I always thought it was just for road blockage. Which
it does help with that too, because we just don't have the personnel. I mean, we still have to man the streets at the same time we're providing all the security. So, we've had to inverse, which means we have to mandatory make people work these events. And it always causes, some issues because, officers want on their day off to have a day off.
Yeah,
but now they've got to come in
with their families.
Or just enjoy a day off. Because in the summertime, it's really hard to do that because everyone's taking vacations and there's minimum counts we have to uphold. So, it causes a little bit of angst around the department when we're called in on our off-duty days to come in and man these festivals and events that go on. But that's part of our job. When you come on, we tell you that at the beginning, this is 365, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. we've got to be available.
So you've got an extra police presence there. You've got the extra dump trucks. Do you have, I'm assuming, snipers as well?
We had extra security measures all over downtown. I
You
won't
probably
get
can't
into
share all those,
what
can you?
everything was, but we had a sizable amount of people ready to go at a moment's notice.
Will that be like the same for tonight? Because tonight's like the big fireworks. It's the end of the whole festival. It wraps up this evening. Is that kind of the same protocol?
Yeah, we do a security assessments. We're involved with Homeland Security. We're involved with Brewers Festival, and then we have our own special events. Captain Burning, who is on, or who will be on, for our next episode for Constitutional Carry. He is in charge of these events along with Marty Bender. So they're kind of do their assessment with all these teams and figure out what we need, where we need, and then get with the team leaders and dispatch people to where they're going.
Talk about pressure. That seems like such a high pressure job.
It's huge because, I mean, it's great if nothing ever happens.
Right.
But if something happens, then we've got to answer what did you know? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that?
know that or know this? Yeah.
And we can't predict everything. We just can't do it. We try to kind of go over scenarios and figure out what we're going to do if A happens, if B happens, if C happens. How can we get people to certain positions? Where can we stop threats? But like I said, we can't ever be everywhere all the time.
And know everything all
Right.
the time. How does that work? Okay, so we're obviously talking about the Three Rivers Festival, but we have other big events in town.
Right.
Is it the same kind of security protocols that are implemented, or is it based on size, or is it based off event?
Based on size and based on what the event is. So sometimes, we may get, like there was one year, I know that there were some security concerns for Pride. So we had extra, security down for that event as well. Because it's our job to protect this community and everyone in it, and everyone has the right to celebrate and do what they want, and not do what they want, but within the confines of the law, of course. But they're entitled to have their day, and if they get the proper permitting and they rent the space, then they get to determine who comes in, who comes out, But we have to be there to enforce that for them if they need that. And all these events do hire their own off-duty officers to man the events.
Yeah, I want to talk about that too. I guess what's the difference when you have like TRF, for example, hiring off-duty officers, and then the city hiring Fort Wayne police officers who are, I'm assuming, are on
duty. Yes.
I mean, are these off-duty officers still in like full gear? Are they there undercover? How are they then getting paid by TRF and not the city?
Right. So if TRF hires the off-duty security, they pay them separately from the department. They determine what the officer wears. So if they want them in plain clothes because they don't, like an overnight where they're watching art in the park, they can probably come in plain clothes as long as they have a visible police, a vest on or a badge with their gun. But they are paid separately from government pay, so the city is not paying them or anything like that. If they're working for the city, like the city is inverse them to come and work, or they've bid this job detail, the city then pays the overtime for it. So depending on where someone is depending on who's paying them.
Do you guys receive, or I don't even know if you can share this, but do you guys receive a lot of intel before every single event, like threat assessments? Does that common around Fort Wayne?
It's common nationwide, so it's a kind of a national database of just kind of what's going on, the ear to the ground. Like, say, for instance, this Roe v. Wade things that are happening around the country. We get assessments like that, and then we look to see, okay, who's saying they're going to be down here. People call in, they watch, hey, so-and-so saying that this is going to happen, and I just don't want anybody to get in any trouble. I don't want anybody to get hurt. I don't want damage to our city. So people will call in and tell us tidbits of information, and sometimes it's nothing. But we're glad they do it, because then we can. Yeah,
you can be the ones to determine.
We can determine that whether or not it's, because we can follow it up with, okay, well then so and so told me this about. Okay, it's the same thing. It's matching up. So this looks like it might be a credible threat or a credible thing that might happen. So we use that, and we do work really well together with all the agencies around here to make sure that we have a safe city, or at least as safe as we can be with it.
I know we talked a lot about the Uvalde Elementary School shooting there in Texas. I'm assuming you've also followed, obviously, the Highland Park shooting that I mentioned at that parade there on the 4th of July.
Yeah.
have you been able to follow it or look into it, and how might that situation compare to the parade in Fort Wayne? Or, I mean, is that just a totally different scale?
Well, overall, it's the same because you have this wide community event, and then you have someone coming to cause harm and disruption to it. It could easily happen in any area, and I don't want people to be frightened to go places that we cannot live in a world like that where we cannot go in.
I'll tell you what, Sophia, it's crazy. I heard from a lot of listeners on the radio program that I host here during the week. I heard from a lot of listeners saying they weren't going to go to the parade this year because of the Highland Park shooting. And that made me so sad. I mean, it
is sad.
Especially the parade had been canceled due to COVID. I mean, it's just such a great community-friendly, family-friendly event. And then to feel like you can't go.
Because you're scared. And I totally get that. I understand where people are coming from with that. And I just don't want to live in a world where we can't do anything because we're afraid of everything. Because I can be at my home and I can step on a wire and electrocute myself and die at home. Different than someone kind of gunning me down at a parade. I understand that, but death is everywhere. Mm-hmm. Injury is everywhere, and I just don't want people to become so afraid that they're not doing things that they should be doing to keep themselves their emotional health well. And I guess for me, I'll go. I just want to be heightened in my awareness of my area that I'm around. And this is something that I think everyone should be doing anyway. We've talked about it before as situational awareness. And look around. Does someone look suspicious? Are they doing something that's causing you like a little anxiety? Then listen to that, call us and tell us where you are, and we'll send an officer down there. We had officers on every block, so we can quickly get to any area, check someone out. There's nothing wrong with that. Just go with your gut. I think sometimes we suppress that and we don't do that enough. And then things that shouldn't happen because we were too afraid to call, we were too afraid to be wrong. And that's okay. You can be wrong. I'd just rather err on the side of safety and be wrong.
Been there, done that. Remember,
Right?
I called in the mailman. I didn't know he was the mailman.
Yeah.
Okay, well, then let me ask you this. Do you think it was the right call after Highland Park to up the security measures here in Fort Wayne?
Yes, I do. Because our job is to provide safety and security for this community. And I'd rather have too many people there than not enough people there if they're needed. And I've said before, things can pop off in an instant. And while we may have people on the street, they may be tasked doing other things, and they won't be able to get to where we need them in a matter of moments, like if we had people stationed around that general vicinity of where the event's occurring. So I always think it's better to be prepared than not be prepared. In
the case of Highland Park, and I know it's always challenging to talk about things like that. It's not like you were there or read all of the incident reports or anything like that, but I think about, that particular shooter, he was up on a rooftop nearby, pointing down, firing off rounds at the crowd from a rooftop that he climbed up to. Is that in that kind of situation where a sniper would hopefully come in, or hopefully they had snipers, or maybe they didn't have snipers even nearby to get to him? I guess I'm trying to figure out what went wrong.
Well, I guess you just assume that that's not going to happen because it never has happened. Highland Park is a suburb of Chicago.
Yeah, it's like one of the least suspecting places.
It's an upper scale area. I've been there. I bought a vehicle from a car dealer there a few years ago, so I know the area. And you just don't think things like this are going to happen. We just, and in a way, I'm happy about that. I'm happy we don't think that the normal people don't think that things like this would happen. That's why I think it's always important if you're having an event to consult with the police department for safety protocols. And most of them do. And I think it's probably, I think it's a measure of headwaters that you have to have security. If you're serving alcohol, if you have this large scale event, you're going to have security. I think it's part of the requirement of renting out space. And I'm glad to see that, because we always want to be on the forefront of that. We don't want to come in after the event started and like, okay, this is messed up, or you don't have adequate security here, and here. But I think sometimes it's something we take for granted. We just do things without ever thinking about security, and that's all we think about. So, but I'm glad that everyone doesn't think like me. Because that would be a sad life for everyone.
Me too. Sometimes I don't know how you do it.
Facing the wall. We'd all be on this side facing the door at a restaurant, and no one would be sitting on the opposite side.
I know, you can't turn it off.
Right, you can't. And like I said, I'm glad we don't live in a world where everyone has to think like that. But if you're having an event, a large-scale event like that, please consult with us, and we'll help you with security, making sure you have and tell you what you need.
Yeah, we have events here all the time at the radio station. Some of them are political. Some of them are just concerts. Some are just simply meet and greets. And whether we're going to have 75 people or 175,000 people, security is the number one thing that we are always addressing.
And it's sad it has to be now.
Yeah,
it's really sad. But, that's just the world we live in right now. And hopefully we can swing the pendulum back the other way when we're not as concerned about that. But I don't think that's going to be for a bit.
I think the other topic that kind of comes centerfold as we're talking about the Highland Park shooting too is red flag laws, because there were some concerns about this individual and him making some threats in the past and doing some crazy things online as they pertain to mass shootings. I'm sure I don't know if you've watched any of the videos that he posted. Yeah. Very disturbing stuff. That's the other one. I go back to that question of what happened, why didn't it work, why were his firearms not seized? I'm
not real familiar with Illinois and if they even have a red flag law. But I know, when these articles come out and then people start talking, and I read comments just to kind of see where people are with things.
Kind of get the pulse,
yeah. And that's probably back from my PIO days. And I just try to keep the pulse on our community as well. And when articles were coming out, I saw people posting, well, brace yourself for red flag laws. And I'm like, well, red flag laws are already here.
Yeah.
Red flag laws have been...
We have them in Indiana, for those of you who don't know it. We have the Jake Laird law is what we have in Indiana.
Yeah, Jake Laird law. And it was established in 2005.
Yeah, it's been around.
It's been around for years. So there hasn't been an influx of officers taking people's guns. It just hasn't happened. So I don't know where this concern about is coming from, where people are so paranoid that we're just going to go in and seize weapons. We still have to meet a threshold and a criteria to do that. And it's a high bar.
What is that? Because I don't really think they work. I feel like there's been so many scenarios, even here in Indiana, where we just confirmed we've had the Jake Laird law in place for quite some time. And we've had situations, well, hey, phone calls were made about this person, or this person shouldn't have had firearms and they had them anyway. And I just hardly ever see proof that they actually work.
I looked up a stat because I am the stat girl.
Of course you do. You're the stat girl.
From 2005 to 2015, the red flag laws lowered suicide rates by 7.9%.
Oh, I've never thought of it actually from that perspective.
Yeah, and there was not an increase by other means at that time. So because they couldn't get a firearm, they didn't hang themselves or they didn't take drugs or whatever. So there was a big increase. And then I think in Connecticut, they have red flag laws too. And in that same period of time, it was 13.9%. A reduction in suicide. So basically,
I never thought
equate
about
it to that.
Yeah.
We always think about mental illness and things like that, but at the time, you're in crisis, and suicide is a crisis, and it is usually has some underlying mental illness aspect to it. But you asked about who are the people that are cause for red flag laws, and the statute reads a person with imminent risk of personal injury to themselves or another individual, with mental issues that may require drugs, but they will not take the drugs. Then there's another one with documented evidence that would give rise to reasonable belief the individual has a propensity for violence or suicidal conduct. So those are thresholds that we know we have to meet, and you have to articulate that. So one instance may not be enough.
And I want you to explain this because I know a lot of, again, folks that listen to my radio program are not fans of red flag laws.
Right.
I myself
are on the fence.
Yes, thank you. Took the words right out of my mouth. In theory, I think they could be a good thing.
If used properly, yes.
But and here, I'll be one of those listeners, for example. How do you know Joe Schmo isn't going to call on Kayla and say, she's unstable, she's unfit, I know she has a firearm, it needs to be taken away, and claiming I'm making all these kinds of threats, when in all reality, none of that's true.
Right. So where's the evidence to the threat? So I want to see, is there text messages? Is there written word? Is there other witnesses to back that up? Because if there's not, then what I'm going to do is I'm not going to seize your weapons, because I may just need to write a report. Look, this is what was said. There was no evidence to back this up. This is a he said, she said, but they're involved in some kind of friendship that's gone wrong. This isn't a divorce. This is a custody dispute. There's several documentations before that there's some issues with custody or their divorce or their relationship. So we're pretty good at determining if this is just I'm going to get you back because I'm mad at you situation, or if this is legitimate issue, because most of the time, if people are relaying these kinds of things, they're doing so in videos, they're doing so in written books, they're doing so in text messages, in phone calls. And a lot of times family members are so used to this, they start recording these and they save them, and then they give us that documentation. And we do talk to the suspects. Hey, this is what's going on. This is what they're saying. What's your side of the story? Mm-hmm. So it's not like we're just going in and believing one side and not talking to anybody and just going in and taking guns. It doesn't work like that. The paperwork that we have to fill out to seize these weapons is a probable cause affidavit. So we are curtailing your constitutional right. We have to have probable cause to do that, just like we would to arrest you. And that cause has to be backed up with evidence. And if the evidence is not there, then we're just not going to do it.
Is that evidence then solely on the person who made the call to say Kayla shouldn't have firearms? Or at that point, do you guys step in and also try and attain that evidence?
Well, we'll ask. I mean, because it comes somehow. So they sent me a text and it said this. Okay, can you show me the text? Mm-hmm. If they don't have the text, then for me, you're just telling me this.
Yeah.
So I need to see that. And then we have ways of documenting that. We'll take photographs of the text. We'll take if it's a paper document, we'll take that. If it's a video, we'll have our computer guys go out and download that for us. But this is all like a case you build up, just like you would a domestic case or a homicide case or a shooting. I mean, this is all evidence you have to gather, and these aren't quick investigations most of the time. You know, you have to dig into these, and you have to interview people and really determine, are you being truthful, or is this just a means of getting back at someone?
Keeping this scenario alive, let's say I was deemed that I can't have firearms, and they are in fact seized by the police department. How and when can I get them back?
Yeah, so this will go before a judge, usually within 72 hours, just like a probable cause affidavit. And the evidence would be presented, and the judge would determine at that point, okay, is there enough evidence to substantiate us keeping these weapons for now until a formal hearing? Or do I just need to give them back because this doesn't meet the threshold of evidence that I need?
What about in the case of the Highland Park shooter? My guess would be then there wasn't enough evidence in those initial, I believe there was 2 different scenarios. I'm assuming there wasn't enough evidence then I believe he had some knives seized at one point, didn't have any firearms at the time, but there wasn't enough to say he couldn't buy firearms in the future or anything like that?
Well, this is where I was a little confused because I'm not real well versed on Illinois law, but I know the father signed some document which allowed him to obtain the firearms, but I don't know how that works there, so I don't really want to say, but I know the father was involved in him obtaining those weapons, which kind of baffled me because if you know your child has mental issues and is saying things and doing things, and I think there were threats to the family and things like that as I was reading articles. I don't know how you'd feel comfortable doing that. Or how that would even be legal, because
do you think he'll face charges?
Like I said, I don't know what Illinois law is, so I'm not quite sure. But in Indiana, if that was something and you helped someone obtain firearms and you knew they had some mental illness, then yeah, you could face charges.
As you should.
Yeah, because that's the whole point of these laws and their stipulations with mental health is to keep firearms out of the hands of those who shouldn't have them. And if you can't predict anyone's behavior, but mental illness is even more so. And it just baffles me how we just take one little thing and we just blow it up, and it becomes then just this pariah, and nobody wants or people just blow things out of proportion. Like with the red flag laws, like from 2005 to 2022, this law has been on the books and it has not been abused, and it's that I know of. And I'm sure someone can prove me wrong somewhere in Indiana. I'm sure something was taken
one
without.
time, yeah.
But it hasn't been on this grand scale of police going and seizing people's guns all the time, because we have to build that case, and it has to be something, or we could face, issues with that. We could be sued as a department, as an individual.
It always surprises me, and then I turn around and surprise people back when they're talking about red flag laws and things that they allege that they will or will not do. And I always say, well, did you know here in Indiana we do have red flag laws, and then they're usually stunned.
Yeah.
So I would encourage folks, if they don't know about the Jake Laird law and they live here in Indiana, maybe educate yourself on it.
And Jake Laird was an officer in IMPD.
Yes. Yeah.
And he was gunned down by a mentally ill individual. And that's where this law kind of came into effect, because they had seized those guns before, but they had to give them back because there was no law on the books to allow us to keep those guns. So that's where this law stems from.
Bringing things full circle here, Sophia, really quick, as again, the Three Rivers Festival wraps up today. The fireworks are happening tonight. I mean, it's pretty much festival season here where we live. I know it is.
Right, every weekend.
Yeah, every weekend. I know it is in a lot of parts of the country. We've had Rib Fest, we've had Busker Fest, German Fest. I don't even know what else is on tap. All the other fests.
Right.
Is there any, nugget of just calm that you can offer people as they are wanting to kind of venture out and enjoy festival season again after it's been shut down for 2 years due to COVID? And then we have all these kind of mass shootings scaring people off. I mean, is there any words of comfort that you could pass along?
Yeah, we're out there.
Yeah.
We're out there in high numbers. Most of the time, you don't even see us. Our drone units keep a good eye on the sky, and they're really good at what they do. I'm not going to say nothing is going to happen, because I don't want to ever say that, because if something does, then people are like, you said nothing was going to happen. But we're there in high numbers. If there is a problem, call 911 from your cell phone. Where are you? Give us the location where you are and tell us what the problem is, and we will get someone to you. Call in the suspicious person. If there's someone not acting right, or someone you see something that you shouldn't see. And I just want to say, for the guns at the festival, they've rented out that space. They've permitted. They've paid for those permits. They get to determine what and who gets to carry, and they have the right to do that. If you rented the space, you could do the same thing. If you wanted everybody armed at your event, you could do that. I just want to make sure that people understand that if you rent and permit a space, that is your space to determine what you want to do in it.
Well, kind of a good place to end, speaking of guns, Sophia, because next week on Unholstered, we are going to talk a little bit more about constitutional carry. I mentioned earlier in the show that it went into effect July 1, and there are a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And I feel like a lot of us are all learning as we go, law enforcement included, prosecutors included, media members included. We're all learning as we go with this new law that just went into effect. So I know you're going to bring in a special guest for that. And we're going to kind of break it down, share what we do know, what we don't know, what remains to be seen. And we'll do that next week here on Unholstered. As always, if you've missed any previous episodes of Unholstered, you can download the Unholstered podcast anywhere you can download a podcast. Your town, your team, your topics. This is Unholstered.
Thanks for listening to Unholstered. Be sure to subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen. And remember, you can listen every Saturday morning at 10:30 on WOWO 1190 and 107.5 FM.
Podcasts by Federated Media.